Ian Tucker, you're gonna freeze out here! 6-year-old Rosie's tiny voice called from inside the rusted blue pickup truck, her breath fogging up the cracked window. Ian shoved the last of the firewood into the truck bed, his worn flannel soaked from the sleet falling over their small Colorado mountain town. Almost done, sweetheart, he shouted, slamming the tailgate shut. His hands were numb, his boots soaked through, but at least they'd have heat tonight. He jogged back to the truck, climbed in, and leaned toward the heater vents. Rosie was wrapped in a patchy pink coat 2 sizes too big, her curly hair sticking out from under her beanie. Hot chocolate when we get home? She asked, eyes wide with hope. If we've got milk left, Ian said with a tired grin. They were halfway down the winding forest road when he spotted a black SUV, nose first in a snowbank, steam pouring from under the hood. A woman stood outside, arms wrapped around herself, her red heels sinking into the snow. Ian pulled over. Stay inside, Rosie. He stepped out, crunching through the snow. The woman turned toward him, and for a second, he was stunned. She looked completely out of place, long caramel hair, a tailored coat that probably cost more than his truck, and a look of sheer frustration on her face. Are you all right? He asked. She exhaled. My car skidded and hit the bank. I didn't realize how bad the road would be. My GPS kept rerouting. I've had no signal for an hour. Yeah, you're deep in the woods. You're lucky someone came by. Lucky's not what I'm feeling right now. She looked down at her soaked heels. I was heading to a retreat center. Supposed to be a digital detox weekend. Bad idea. He looked under her hood. Radiators busted. You're not driving this anywhere tonight. She blinked. So what do I do? I live about 15 minutes that way. You can come warm up, call a tow from town in the morning. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You're just offering to take a total stranger to your house. He shrugged. You're standing in a snowstorm in 4 inches of designer death traps. I've got a 6-year-old in the truck, if that helps ease your mind. She hesitated. Fine. But only until I can get someone to pick me up. They drove in silence. Rosie peeked back at the woman and whispered, Is she a princess? Ian chuckled. Probably. The woman smiled slightly. My name's Kaia. Kaia Langston. Ian. That's Rosie. Kaia gave Rosie a soft wave. Hi. Their cabin was small but warm. Ian lit the fireplace while Rosie showed off her coloring books. Kaia peeled off her coat and sat gingerly on the old couch, clearly unused to such humble surroundings. Thank you, she said after a moment. You didn't have to stop. Couldn't leave someone to freeze. She looked at him. Most people would have kept driving. I'm not most people. No, she said quietly. You're not. That night, after Rosie had fallen asleep in her room, Kaia sat at the kitchen table in one of Ian's flannels, her wet clothes drying by the fire. Ian poured 2 mugs of cocoa and slid one toward her. She looked around the modest kitchen. You built all this? Yeah. After Rosie's mom left, I needed to give her something steady. Kaia nodded. You're doing really well, considering. He shrugged. It's not much. But she's happy. That's what matters. Kaia looked at him for a long moment. You know, you're the first person I've met in years who didn't ask what I do within 10 minutes. He raised an eyebrow. Should I have? She smiled. Most people do, once they see the car or the coat. Well, I was a little busy making sure you didn't get hypothermia. She laughed. Fair. In the morning, Kaia was gone. Ian stepped outside, heart pounding until he saw a note tucked into the door. Thank you for everything. I'm sending someone to tow the SUV. You saved me. I won't forget it. K. He read it twice before folding it into his wallet. 3 days later, he was working on a neighbor's roof when a black town car pulled up beside the cabin. A man in a suit stepped out and handed Ian a white envelope. For Mr. Ian Tucker. Ian opened it slowly. Inside was a handwritten card. I owe you more than you know. come to Denver. I've arranged a suite for you and Rosie at the Langston Grand. I'd like to talk Kaia. Underneath was a business card. Kaia Langston, CEO, Langston Global Holdings, net worth $15 billion. Ian stared at the name, then the car, then back at the card. Dad? Rosie tugged his flannel. What's a suit man doing at our house? Ian crouched beside her. I think we just found out that the lady we helped is a billionaire. Ian had never been inside a building with marble floors that gleamed like water. The Langston Grand wasn't just a hotel, it was a monument to wealth. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen rainclouds overhead, and the walls looked like they'd been carved by royalty. He adjusted Rosie's coat and held her hand tighter as they stepped into the lobby. A concierge in a navy uniform approached with a practiced smile. Mr. Tucker and Miss Rosie? Ian nodded. Right this way. Miss Langston reserved the presidential suite for you. Let me have someone carry your bag. It's just the one, Ian said, gesturing to the duffel over his shoulder. The man blinked. Very well. They were escorted into a private elevator, the kind that required a key to access. Rosie looked up at Ian, her eyes wide. Do you think this is where princesses sleep? Ian didn't answer. His chest felt tight. The suite was 2 stories of something that didn't feel real. A grand piano sat near the floor-to-ceiling windows. The kitchen gleamed with chrome fixtures, and a staircase curved upward like it belonged in a palace. Their guide pointed out the bedrooms, the fully stocked pantry, and the concierge number by the phone. When they were alone, Ian crouched in front of Rosie. You stay in here, okay? There's a lady named Corina down the hall who'll bring you lunch. I'm just going to talk for a little while. Rosie nodded solemnly. Can I ask for pancakes? Sure. Kaia was waiting on the rooftop garden. She wore a navy coat with gold buttons, her hair pulled back in a sleek twist. The skyline flickered behind her like a sea of stars. She turned as Ian stepped onto the terrace. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said. I wasn't sure I should, Ian admitted. She gestured to one of the curved benches by the gas fire. Let's sit. He hesitated, then followed. I didn't mean to vanish, she said. I had to leave early for a board meeting in Singapore. I asked my assistant to send a car with a note. I wasn't sure if you'd be angry. I wasn't angry. Just surprised. You went from stranded in the snow to owning the building I'm standing in. She looked down. It's complicated. Ian folded his arms. Try me. My family runs Langston Global. I took over after my father passed. I've spent the past 6 years cleaning up his legacy: corruption, lawsuits, offshore accounts. I've barely had time to breathe, much less live. He studied her. So you ran off to the mountains to escape it? Yes. And I got stuck in a snowbank. Ian leaned back. That part sounds familiar. Kaia laughed, but it faded quickly. When you helped me, you didn't know who I was. You didn't want anything from me. I can't remember the last time that happened. I didn't help you to get something. I know. That's why I wanted to do something for you. He frowned. You sent a car and a suite. Seems like a lot for a thank you. It's not the thank you. She reached into her coat pocket and handed him a folder. He opened it slowly. There was a contractor license application, a business registration form with the name Tucker and Daughter Carpentry, and a letter from a financial institution confirming a deposit in a business account. He looked up. What is this? I know what it's like to have to build something from the ground up. I want to fund your business: real tools, a truck, a crew if you want one. You saved my life. Let me help you live yours. Ian stared at the papers. You don't even know me. You're a man who gets up at dawn, who teaches his daughter to be kind, who stops for a stranger in a storm. That's enough for me. He closed the folder. This feels like charity. It's not. It's an investment in someone who deserves more than just surviving. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Kaia stood. You don't have to decide tonight. Stay as long as you like. When you're ready, I'll be downstairs. As she walked away, Ian looked out over the city, lights blinking like promises. His hands, rough and calloused, tightened around the folder. He didn't know what this meant yet. But something was shifting. And for the first time in years, it wasn't winter in his chest anymore. Ian didn't sleep much that night. The suite was quieter than home. Too quiet. No creaking floorboards, no wind clawing at the windows, no Rosie whispering from the next room asking for water. Just the hum of climate control and the distant sounds of a city that didn't know his name. He stood at the window overlooking Denver's glittering skyline, the folder Kaia had given him still unopened on the table. She hadn't come up again. No calls, no knocks. She'd left him space. By morning, Rosie had made herself at home, stretched across the king-sized bed with a breakfast tray balanced on her lap. Pancakes shaped like bears. Real maple syrup. She looked up with powdered sugar on her chin. "Dad, this place is weird," she said, pointing at the remote. "There's a button that makes the curtains go away." Ian sat beside her. "Do you like it?" "I like the pancakes. But it smells like fancy soap everywhere." He ruffled her hair. "Eat up. We're meeting Kaia downstairs." Rosie grinned. "Is she gonna wear another coat with buttons?" "No idea." They found Kaia in a private lounge on the 32nd floor. The room had velvet chairs, glass walls, and a piano that looked untouched. She was seated near the window with a woman in her 40s sharp suit, dark lipstick, tablet in hand. Kaia stood when they approached, her expression unsure until Rosie ran straight to her and wrapped her arms around her legs. "I miss you," Rosie said. Kaia bent down, surprised. "I miss you too." The woman beside her cleared her throat. Kaia straightened. "Ian, this is Naomi. My legal counsel." Naomi gave a brisk nod. "Nice to meet you. Kaia's told me quite a lot." Ian folded his arms. "That right? She's offered to back your carpentry business. I've drawn up a simple partnership structure to protect both parties. You'd retain full creative control, she'd provide capital and infrastructure." Ian glanced at Kaia. "You brought a lawyer to breakfast." Kaia stepped in. "I didn't want to assume. I just wanted you to know I'm serious. This isn't about charity. It's about what you could build if someone finally gave you the chance." Naomi stood. "I'll give you two some privacy." Once they were alone, Kaia walked to the window. "You're still thinking about it." Ian joined her. "Feels like stepping off a cliff." She turned. "Then I'll jump first." He blinked. "You asked why I really came to the mountains," she continued. "I didn't go there to detox. I went because I was exhausted. Every conversation I have is strategic. Every relationship I've had has come with conditions. You and Rosie were real. And I didn't want it to end in a snowstorm." Ian looked down at the city. "I'm not built for this world. I hammer nails. I fix roofs. And I negotiate with oil magnates before lunch," she said with a smile. "But that didn't scare you when I was standing in the snow." He looked at her. "That's different." "Why?" "Because now I know what you are." She held his gaze. "What I am is tired of being alone." He didn't answer, but something shifted in his eyes. She glanced toward the elevator. "There's something I want to show you. Will you come?" Rosie tugged his hand. "Can I come too?" Kaia knelt. "It's a surprise. But it's noisy and full of grown-ups. I was hoping you'd stay here and eat more bear pancakes." Rosie glanced at her father, then nodded solemnly. "Only if I can have whipped cream again." "You got it." Kaia led Ian out through a private elevator that bypassed the other floors and opened directly into a glass corridor high above the city. On the other side, a rooftop helipad gleamed under the sun, and parked at its center was something Ian had only seen in movies: a sleek black helicopter with the Langston crest on its side. He stopped short. "You're kidding." Kaia didn't smile. "No. I want you to see something." They lifted off moments later. The city shrank beneath them, then vanished entirely as they cut west toward the mountains. The pilot was silent behind mirrored glasses. Kaia sat beside Ian, her hands folded in her lap. After 20 minutes, the helicopter descended near a clearing nestled in the pines. A team of workers waited near a half-finished structure with beams, steel supports, and a view that made Ian's breath catch. The framework of a sprawling lodge stretched across the clearing, facing a frozen lake that glittered beneath the morning sun. Kaia stepped out first. This was supposed to be a retreat center, but the project stalled 2 years ago. It's been half-finished ever since. Ian ran a hand along one of the beams. It's good wood. Whoever started it knew what they were doing. They did, Kaia said quietly. But they left when the funding was pulled. I've kept it dormant, waiting for the right person. He turned to her. I want you to finish it, she said. Run it. Make it something real. Host families. Teach kids how to build with their hands. Use it as a place that matters. He shook his head slowly. You're offering me a mountain. I'm offering you a future. One you don't have to scrape together with second-hand tools and sleepless nights. One where Rosie grows up believing her dad can build anything. Ian stared at the structure. Snow dusted the beams like flour on bread. The air smelled like pine and sap. And for the first time in years, the silence around him didn't feel empty, it felt like a beginning. He turned to Kaia. If I say yes, this changes everything. She nodded. That's what I'm hoping for. He looked down at his boots, then back at the lodge. Then tell your lawyer to bring more paper. We've got work to do. The grand opening of Cedar Rise Lodge arrived with the kind of spring sunshine that made the mountains glow. The snow had melted into streams that danced down the slopes, and the pine trees stood proudly along the lake's edge, their reflections rippling in the water. The lodge, once skeleton and steel, now stood tall and finished stone fireplaces, timber beams, and windows that framed the view like artwork. Ian stood beside Rosie on the edge of the dock, watching boats glide across the lake. Families gathered along the shore, kids kicking gravel, couples holding hands, laughter echoing through the trees. The lodge had drawn people from all over, just as Kaia had hoped. But it hadn't become a luxury hideaway. It had become a sanctuary, affordable, simple, grounded. Did you ever think this would happen? Rosie asked, her tiny fingers wrapped around his. Ian looked out at the scene, his jaw tight with emotion. No. Not like this. She pointed toward the hill behind them. Kaia said there's a surprise up there for you. He turned, brow furrowed. She did? Rosie nodded. She said you'd know what it means when you saw it. He found Kaia on the slope, waiting beside a path that curved into the trees. She wore hiking boots and a soft linen shirt, her hair loose for once, strands catching the breeze as she smiled, different than before. Not guarded. Not polished. Just real. I brought you something, she said as he reached her. I thought the lodge was the gift. Kaia raised an eyebrow. You haven't seen it yet. They walked together in silence, the trail opening into a clearing where a small cabin stood alone. Freshly built. Clean lines, natural wood, a front porch that faced the lake below. Ian stepped forward, stunned. This is yours, Kaia said. You and Rosie. A place that's not temporary. You shouldn't have to live inside a project you're running. He turned to her. You built us a home. She nodded once. You gave me shelter when I had nothing but frostbite and pride. I thought it was time I returned the favor. He stepped onto the porch, ran a hand over the railing. I don't know what to say. Kaia moved closer. Then don't say anything yet. Her hand brushed his, and there was no hesitation this time, just warmth, steady and certain. They stood side by side, looking out over the lake, their silence filled with the hum of life below and the rustling of branches above. You know, she said quietly, I used to look at my father's world and envy the control. Every corner of his life was structured, sealed, efficient. I thought that was power. Ian leaned against the post. What changed? You did. You and Rosie made me realize that power doesn't mean being untouchable. It means being able to choose the life you want, not the one people expect you to live. He watched her for a beat. What life do you want now? Kaia looked up at him, her voice steady. One that includes you. Not just the lodge. Not just the business. You. Rosie. Even the chaos. Especially the chaos. He laughed, low and genuine. You sure about that? Chaos is kind of our specialty. She slipped her fingers between his. Then I guess I'd better get used to it. Later that evening, the lodge's main hall was lit with lanterns, the scent of roasted cedar and grilled vegetables hanging in the air. Rosie danced between tables, chasing bubbles from a machine Kaia had insisted on renting. Ian sat at a long table with his crew men and women who'd helped him build the place, each of them paid fairly and treated with respect. The dining room was filled with warmth, not just from the fire but from the people who'd chosen to return, to rest, to feel welcome. Kaia stepped onto the small platform at the front of the room, clinking her glass gently with a fork. The room quieted. I didn't build this lodge, she began. I funded it. But the man who brought it to life is sitting right there. All eyes turned to Ian. He shifted uncomfortably, but Kaia continued. Ian Tucker didn't just raise a roof. He raised a community. He built a place where no one has to prove their worth. Where people come as they are. He taught me what real legacy looks like. Not steel towers or offshore accounts. But something that lasts because it was built with heart. She paused, her voice softening. And I'd like to make that legacy permanent. Ian stood slowly, heart pounding. Kaia. What are you doing? She met his eyes, unflinching. I'm asking you to marry me. The room inhaled as one. Rosie gasped from across the room. Wait, she can do that? Laughter rippled through the crowd. Kaia smiled, but her voice didn't waver. I know you didn't expect this. I know your world didn't leave much room for dreams. But I want to build a life with you, not just the parts that are easy. All of it. Ian stared at her, stunned. You're serious. I've never been more. He stepped forward slowly, then took her hands in his. You didn't just change my life, he said. You gave Rosie a future. You gave me a reason to believe that something better was possible. So the answer's yes. Of course it's yes. The room exploded in applause as Rosie ran forward and jumped into Ian's arms. Kaia wrapped them both in a hug, laughter and tears mixing as fireworks popped over the lake outside. Someone had clearly planned ahead. Later that night, when the guests had gone and the stars hung heavy over the mountains, Ian and Kaia stood on the porch of their new home. Rosie had fallen asleep curled up in a blanket on the porch swing, a half-eaten cookie still in her hand. Kaia leaned against Ian's shoulder. You know what the best part is? What? We didn't save each other. We just reminded each other who we really were. He kissed her temple gently. Then I'm glad you got stuck in that snowbank. She smiled without a word. And for the first time in a long, long while, the world felt exactly right. Ian stood in the workshop behind the lodge, covered in sawdust and warmth. He wiped his hands on a rag and glanced at the wall-mounted calendar, where Rosie had scribbled hearts around a date with purple marker. 1 week left. Kaia appeared in the doorway, her hair pulled into a loose braid, eyes lit with something quiet and certain. She watched him for a moment before stepping inside, her boots crunching lightly over the wood shavings. You're building again, she said. I needed something to keep my hands busy, he replied, gesturing toward the half-carved bench in front of him. Can't stand still too long. Makes me feel like the world's going to shift without me. Kaia ran her fingers over the grain of the bench. It's for the porch? Yeah. I figured Rosie would want a spot to watch the lake when she's older. Kaia nodded. She's been asking me how long she has to walk down the aisle at the wedding. You told her she could run if she wanted, Ian said, a grin tugging at his mouth. She said running would make her trip and fall. Then she asked if she could do cartwheels instead. She's got your flair for spectacle. Kaia leaned against the workbench, her voice softer now. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't crashed that night? Every day, he said without hesitation. And every time I do, I think about how close I came to missing all this. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded paper. Rosie gave me this yesterday. Told me it was a contract of forever. Ian opened it carefully. Rosie's handwriting sprawled across the page, complete with uneven lines and glitter glue that had dried in clumps. Kaia is now my stepmom forever. She makes pancakes weird but good, and she never forgets stuff like birthdays or when I lose my socks. She loves my dad, which is important. Ian read it twice, then tucked it inside the drawer of the workbench. That's legally binding, right? Kaia laughed. I think we'd lose in court, but I'm willing to take the risk. The week passed in a blur of final touches, floral arrangements, seating charts, Rosie practicing her walking like a very serious flower girl. Ian's crew handled the setup, stringing lanterns across the trees and lining the lake's edge with candles. Kaia's staff managed the logistics, but she refused to let anyone else choose the music. She and Rosie spent an afternoon arguing over the first dance song until Rosie finally picked one that made Kaia tear up at the first few notes. On the wedding day, the sun rose over the mountains in soft gold. Guests arrived by shuttle and foot, their shoes crunching over gravel paths, their laughter echoing through the trees. The ceremony took place on the dock, the lake behind them as still as glass. Rosie scattered petals with theatrical precision, pausing every few steps to ensure they landed artistically. Ian waited at the end of the aisle, his suit tailored but simple, his nerves visible only in the way he clenched and unclenched his hands. Kaia appeared at the top of the path, her dress of flowing ivory with sleeves that caught the light like water. She walked alone, but her steps were certain. She never needed anyone to hold her up. But when she reached Ian, she didn't hesitate to take his hand. The officiant, a local woman who ran the mountain bookstore and had once let Rosie spend 3 hours rearranging the children's section, kept the ceremony short. Their vows were spoken without notes. Kaia's voice didn't waver. You gave me the first life I didn't want to run from. And when I finally stopped running, you were still there. Ian's grip tightened on her hands. You turned my world upside down just by being in it. I didn't even know how much I was missing until you showed up in the snow. They kissed to applause and the sound of Rosie cheering loudest of all. The reception was held beneath the lanterns. Rosie danced with every guest, including the mayor, 2 large chefs, and Kaia's head of PR, who wore heels that sank into the dirt every few steps. Ian and Kaia danced barefoot, their movements slow and easy, the music winding around them like a spell. That night, after the guests had departed and Rosie had fallen asleep curled up in Kaia's shawl on the porch swing, Ian and Kaia stood at the edge of the dock. Do you miss it? Ian asked. The city. The boardrooms. Power lunches. Private jets. Kaia shook her head. That wasn't power. This is. She gestured toward the lodge, the cabins beyond, the laughter still fading in the air. I know who I am here, she said. And for the first time, I like that person. Ian wrapped an arm around her. She's my favorite. Good, Kaia said, resting her head against his chest. Because she's staying. Years passed, quietly and entirely full. The lodge expanded, but never lost its soul. Ian's business flourished, with Rosie eventually learning to build furniture, as well as her father. She spent summers teaching visiting kids how to use hammers and winters designing treehouses with reckless joy. Kaia stepped away from Langston Global entirely. She sold her stake, donated a portion to education projects across rural communities, and used the rest to fund small local businesses. She never missed the boardroom. One autumn afternoon, as the leaves turned every shade of fire, Ian found Kaia sitting on the porch swing, a mug of cider in her hands and a blanket over her knees. Rosie was off at college, sending chaotic postcards home with doodles and half-finished poems. Ian sat beside her and took her free hand. You ever think about going back? He asked. Kaia tipped her head toward him. To what? He smiled. Exactly. She kissed him then, slow and certain, the kind of kiss that didn't need ceremony or applause. Just the quiet between heartbeats, and the world they built together. Everything they'd lost had led them here. And neither of them would trade it for anything else.